treating these asylum seekers or separating those families or caging those kids, what did you do at that moment of truth? And ultimately, that is what compelled us to run, for those reasons and everything that they're going to ask. The paraphrase is, the politician looks to the next election, the statesman or stateswoman looks to the next generation. I'm really looking down the road. When we look at climate, más o menos will be okay. Some communities won't. They're on the front lines of climate change. They're getting pounded right now in southwest Iowa, Pacific Junction. Every home underwater in a town that has never meaningfully flooded. They're in the midst of climate change. But I know that our kids and grandkids and the generations that follow theirs will bear the absolute hellish brunt of what is to come unless we change course right now. So that urgency that Amy and I feel, perhaps that you feel, is informed by the urgency that I see in the young people who are leading on these issues, and then the judgment that we anticipate from our kids down the road. So every decision on every issue, every position I've taken is about those next generations to make sure that we're there. And so that's the animating force of this campaign. And you have to ask those other candidates how they answer that generational question, but that's where we're coming from on this. Thanks for asking. Appreciate it.
I'm going to apologize if this becomes a Chuck Todd moment, but my question is lengthy. So I'm an educator, and I have seen in Iowa and in Arizona and West Virginia the demise of the unions. But not only that, just educators in general have kind of a target on our backs right now, and our public school system in general. Along with that, you see the law enforcement, and they kind of have a target on their back, and farmers, and the idea of our dairy farmers and our family farms aren't able to make a living. And you used to, in one of the things, the pursuit of happiness in the American dream, you used to be able to be a middle class teacher, farmer, and that was living the American dream. I have 2 children and a husband, and we have a home, and some people aren't making it on that. And so, What is your plan to help maintain or restore that middle class in our education system? And please pick, if you become the president, a Secretary of Education who's had a public school education.
Really thoughtful question. Transcends anything Chuck Todd could do. Just my I begin with school teachers and public school educators who in 2017 in this state lost the ability to organize and use the leverage of what they bring into that classroom to exact not just better wages and not just better benefits, but better delivery of instruction and education to those children in front. That's why any teacher entered the classroom. Not to get rich, not for the benefits. Certainly you could get far richer, be better taken care of in other industries and professions. You responded to a calling. You wanted to unlock that lifelong love of learning that resides within every single child, because you know once you do, there's no stopping that kid. And by extension, there is no stopping this country. So the lack of pay is connected to an inability to organize, which is connected to, in the bigger picture, a lack of respect for those public servants who have dedicated their lives to improving their communities and to this country. So we need to restore the right to organize, especially in those states that define themselves by right to work. It's fundamental to every child receiving a world-class education. Teachers need to be paid enough so that they can work just one job. Too many are working a second or a third job just to make ends meet right now. They're also laboring under these high-stakes standardized tests that in no way meaningfully measure your performance in the classroom or the potential of the child in front of you. They're working with kids who on the first day of kindergarten are already 10 months behind in some cases in reading comprehension. Those may be the children of parents who are working 2 and 3 jobs themselves, who don't have the luxury to read to their kids before that first day of school. So what if we did this? Paid teachers a living wage, made sure that the next Secretary of Education herself or himself had experience teaching in a public school classroom so they understand what it's like, what it means. Give teachers a seat at the table for the next iteration of the education policy that comes out of Washington, D.C. So whatever succeeds, the Every Student Succeeds Act, I want you to help write that. Extend learning to pre-K universally so that those children who are 10 months behind in kindergarten, they can start at an even starting line with every other kid in America. Let's hire teachers who look like the students before them so we can get to the issue of not just equality but equity in education. And then let's make sure that we understand the spirit of your question, that doing all of this builds and fortifies the middle class in this country, which is fundamental to our economic success at large. So any kind of public servant, from school teacher to police officer to anyone else who's dedicated themselves to improving this country, I want to make sure that we have their back. And then in addition, just quickly, I want to make sure that anyone who works in this country has a living wage, so $15 as the floor. Anyone who works can take time off to take care of their kids, so paid family leave, affordable child care, and then back to the question of health care, that's a right, not a privilege. It's not something you have to worry about. You're well enough to go to work, to raise your families, to pursue your education and your genius. So these are some steps I think that we can take going forward. Thank you very much for the question. Hey there.
Hi. So I actually have a question for Amy. So a couple months ago, I was reading Michelle Obama's book, and there were a few chapters that really reminded me of your family. And I was wondering if you read the book, and if there were any chapters that really resonated well with you. You could maybe see your family and the Obama family at all.
Well, I did read the book. I read the book probably a few weeks before we had really decided together that we were going to embark on this. And I have to say my stomach was in knots. Michelle carried herself with so much grace. And she set this incredibly high bar, both in terms of what she was doing herself professionally, taking care of the kids, but then also her involvement in the campaign. And so during the Senate race, I continued working, taking care of the kids for the most part. And then as I was able, tried to join Beto on the road, but it was not all that often. And so trying to envision myself balancing all three of those things as really, tremendously as she did was incredibly overwhelming. But an incredible role model to be able to look up to and hopefully be able to learn from.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
I contend that a president who wanted to solve the crisis at the border would be doing it, and I think this president wants the chaos to continue as a campaign issue.
Yes.
I heard that it's in Honduras. We don't even have an ambassador. We need to help those folks so that they'll stay in their country of origin with their families and their customs. That's the preference. But we're not helping them.
Well said. This president is akin to an arsonist who wants credit for putting out the fire. So the chaos that you see at the border was not brought to us by asylum seekers from the Northern Triangle of Central America. It was imposed by the President of the United States of America. Putting kids in cages, deporting their mothers back to the very country from which they fled, keeping these families separated, which visits a torture on that child that I can only imagine for my kids. This is something uniquely of his doing. And furthermore, to your point, he has now promised to cut off all aid to Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador, which only totaled $500 million, which, to put it in perspective, he wants to spend $30 billion to build a 2,000-mile, 30-foot-high wall to separate us from the country of Mexico, which will keep out precisely zero of the misery that we're seeing right now. No wall is going to stop a family who's so desperate that they're going to go on that 2,000-mile journey. So how do we meet that challenge? In my administration, we will double the investment that we're making in Central America. We will focus that on violence reduction, because I agree with you. No family wants to leave their home country, their home community, their home language, unless they have to do that. I want to make sure that they don't have to do that. I want to bring the expertise and innovation of farmers here in Iowa to Guatemala, where they're seeing historic droughts and historic low yields on what they're planting and growing. Iowa led the Green Revolution. We have the best farmers on the face of the planet in this state. Let's make sure that we bring some of that know-how to bear in those countries in Central America. And then for those families who do arrive on our border, let's treat them with compassion. Let's not detain them. Let's not separate them. Let's not cage their kids. In fact, in our administration, we will make sure that no family is criminally prosecuted for coming to this country and doing what any human being would do under the same circumstances. A family case management program to ensure that they follow our laws, but that we treat them humanely. we're the wealthiest and most powerful country on the face of the planet. We can certainly meet this challenge and do so in a way that's going to make us proud and the generations that follow us proud. Thanks for asking. Yeah.
We have time for one more.
Okay, sir.
First part is just a comment. Everybody that says put everybody on Medicare and do away with private health care. Medicare only takes care of 80%. The other 20% is supplied by private health insurance. But the other question, or the other comment I have, is what would you do? I mean, this is ridiculous. We have private corporations that are putting most of these kids in jail.
Yeah.
And supposedly, as I said last night, it was $750 per person per day.
Yep.
Let's put them in Marriott.
Yeah.
And they, Marriott would really appreciate it. The other people, I mean,
You're absolutely right.
this private prison thing is just ridiculous.
It's going to be hard for those future generations looking back on us in 2019 to believe that we were doing this, that inside the country we had 2.3 million people behind bars. The most incarcerated population on the face of the planet is right here in the United States of America. Home of the free, land of the brave, land of the free, home of the brave. And then on the border, we've got tens of thousands of people, and this network of detention camps for kids. We visited one in Homestead, Florida. Hundreds of kids there, maybe more than 2,000 are locked up. We mentioned Clinton, Texas, but it's all over the country, and it's being run by for-profit corporations who have a bottom line interest in those kids staying more days. The number we heard for those kids in Homestead, Florida, $775 a day to keep them locked up. The family case management program that I described would be less than a tenth of the cost of what we're doing right now. It ensures that those families are reunited, stay together, and follow our laws. And those laws include, if you qualify for asylum, you stay in this country. If you do not qualify for this asylum, you do not stay in this country. I want to make sure that everyone understands that, but that there's a humane way to follow that. In our administration, we will do away with for-profit prisons and for-profit immigration detention centers. We'll also, in terms of our criminal justice system, end a war on drugs that has become a war on people. And what we know, unfortunately, it's a war on some people more than others. I believe African Americans comprise about 3% of Iowa's population, but they're more than 25% of the prison population in this state right now. That is not right. That's a disproportionate delivery of justice in this state and in this country. We can certainly do better. So whether it's at the border, whether it's here in this community or in this state, I think we have to look at policies that are far more humane, that reserve the right to imprison and deny someone's freedom to the state and to the state alone, not to any private corporation. And in so doing, I think you unlock not just people, but their potential, everything that they're going to contribute to this country, the genius that will be revealed. I think it's a great opportunity for us at this moment, and I hope it's one that transcends party lines, that Republicans, independents, and Democrats alike can see the wisdom in being able to do this. So thank you for the question. Appreciate it. Cynthia is telling me that is going to be our. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, yeah, one more.
Go for it. Amy's bringing in one more.
Sorry,
One
Cynthia.
quick question. A lot of the stuff you're talking about, privatization of government agencies or whatever, it started in the 1980s, and it's all due to lobbyists. So, if you were to become president, what are you going to do about all the bought politics?
What you're describing is a government that, in so many instances, is bought and paid for. We were talking about prescription medication prices right now. There's a reason that by law we don't use the leverage we have in Medicare to drive down those prices. It is because of the pharmaceutical companies who can buy not just access and influence, but outcomes in elections and legislation. Our campaign does not take a dime from any political action committee, does not accept support from lobbyists or corporations or special interests. You asked what we would do in our administration. I would ensure that we reform our election laws so that candidates for federal office and federal office holders cannot accept PAC contributions, that they're forced to rely on the people that they represent and serve, their constituents, for their guidance and their direction and their marching orders. I'm also proposing term limits for members of Congress so that we renew those institutions and they reflect, the diversity and the genius of this country. No reason that any member of Congress should serve for 4 or 5 or 6 decades, which has been the case in Congress so far. I think that kind of turnover, that faith in one another, the inability for corporations to buy in to the process allows us to begin making laws that favor people instead of corporations, people instead of special interests, people instead of lobbyists.
I know, we're all Democrats, right? But Chuck Grassley has been one of these politicians that's been in Congress for 60 years or 50. And he's been good for us. That's arguable. But he has.
Yeah.
In the past. But I just do not see somebody like him go.
Yeah. Here's my thing. This is why Amy and I decided that we would pursue term limits regardless of what the other members of Congress did. Your president can only serve for 8 years. The mayor of El Paso, Texas can only serve for 8 years. There's nothing so special about a member of Congress that they need to serve longer. And it also, when you set term limits, you are renewing your faith in your fellow citizens. You say, there's nothing so special about me that I can't be replaced by someone who will do just as good, maybe more likely a better job than I've been able to do. When we stepped down after 3 terms in Congress, the person who succeeded me, Veronica Escobar, became the first woman elected to represent the 16th Congressional District in Texas and the first Latina elected to serve any congressional district in the state of Texas in our history. If I had not gotten out of the way, because the incumbent has such protections and such advantage in fundraising and their prospects for re-election, it might have taken decades for her to be able to do that. So I think there's real value, and I don't want to dismiss the fact that there's some long-serving legislators who've done great work. I'm just confident that there are others who could replace them, as they will be replaced by some point, and do just as good, if not a better job going forward. Thank you for the question. Appreciate it. I want to again thank Kurt and Paula and the Tranquility House for hosting us here today. To all of you for your time and your attention and your excellent questions. Looking forward, Cynthia will have time to say hello?
Yes.
That's a yes? Okay. For anyone who would like to say hello or grab a picture, I would love to have the chance to shake your hand. And lastly, would really love to have your help in this election. I would ask you to consider caucusing for us and making that commitment here today. We would love to have you on this team. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.